Alice Madness Returns is an action platformer of the Xbox 360 and PS3 era. It's become a bit of a cult classic, and many people have been clamoring for a third and final game in the trilogy, Alice Asylum. Sadly, it looks like the final installment will never come to pass. Let's dive into everything surrounding the game and then look at the game itself. My name is Phantom and you're watching, remember, Alice Madness Returns? Alice Madness Returns is a sequel to the game American McGee's Alice, which released October 2000 for the PC. That game was well received and remained as a niche game. Madness Returns was announced at the DICE Summit in 2009 and later released in June of 2011. The game focused more on action-adventure third person with an emphasis on platforming. And my god, is it a platformer. We will touch on more of that later. Like the first game, Madness Returns was well received, but remained as a niche game and still is to this day. It's grown quite a bit in popularity though, and is known as a classic to many. McGee wanted to make one last game for the Alice franchise called Alice Asylum. There is a whole Bible for it out in public view if you want. I'll link it in the description below. Sadly, with all efforts exhausted, McGee stopped trying to make this game, simply because EA, the sole owners of the IP, didn't give permission. McGee said himself, and I quote, "For my part, I have also reached an endpoint with Alice and with game production in general. I have no other ideas or energy left to apply towards getting a new Alice game made, nor do I have any interest in pursuing new game ideas within the context of the current environment of game development." This brings us full circle to the statement I made years ago, which initiated EA reaching out to me to ask if I wanted to explore making a new Alice game. I have no control over the Alice IP and no ability to make a new game happen. That control and ability rest entirely with EA. If someone does manage to convince EA to make Asylum, I would like to make clear that, from this point forward, I have no desire to be involved with that or any other Alice-related development. My involvement with Alice is also at an end. Going forward, I will focus on my family and our family business at Mysterious. And with that, we circle back to what looks like to be the final game in the series and what we are looking at today, Alice Madness Returns. With the game being heavily linked to the first game, it's important to know at least a little of the first game, which they cover quite well. In American McGee's Alice, your parents and sister die in a fire, which seems to be that your cat started. You survive, and your wounds heal in about a year's time. But you are put into an asylum, and mentally you are trapped in Wonderland. They try many ways to help you heal, such as bloodletting and such, but they have little to no effect. It's a challenge to even feed Alice during this time. Eventually, you save Wonderland and gain enough sanity to leave the asylum and be placed in the care of another doctor. Your inheritance pays for the room and therapy, and this is where Madness Returns begins. You start the game with the doctor trying to have you forget those pesky memories and move on with your life. But quickly you fall back into Wonderland where there is a new danger lurking. A massive train the shape of a castle comes tramping through Wonderland, and you must find it and destroy it to save Wonderland, bringing you to new and old locations alike. Fighting those bad thoughts along the way and every now and then snapping back to reality, though you never really know what is reality and what is Alice's imagination. I don't want to spoil the story, but that's a big reason I played the game, and probably is the reason for many others. I'll just say that I enjoyed the story through and through. Its pacing is good, the ending makes sense but wasn't as strong as I would have liked, but the characters Alice encounters are interesting and wicked. I'm happy they didn't leave it on a cliffhanger and ended it the way they did. As stated before, Alice Madness Returns is an action-adventure third-person platformer and a few puzzles sprinkled about, and I guess you could say Souls-like controls. I say Souls-like because almost everything with combat is a Souls-like these days. But the combat is so damn satisfying. You get 4 weapons in the game, 2 close combat and 2 far combat? Anyway, there is also an umbrella used for defense and a dodge button that turns you into a bunch of butterflies to phase through attacks for a split second. The Vorpal Blade, I believe I'm saying that right, feels great to use, and the rest of the weapons are a lot of fun as well. Enemies are varied based on the location you are in, and some are consistent throughout the game, and they pace out the new enemies through the whole game very well. Combat wasn't really hard per se, but it was still a lot of fun. Now, I played the game on normal, but there is a hard and insane difficulty if you ever want to up the challenge. Though I was surprised to see no real boss battles. They set up a few points where a boss battle is expected. However, the only real boss is at the end of the game, and that one wasn't even too hard. There's also this hysteria mode when you're low on health. The screen goes black and white, you become invincible for a period of time, and you do a lot more damage. The character looks insane, and this version of Alice has become a bit of a character herself in the community. I'd say the only gripe I have with this gameplay is the cameras when in combat. When I lock on to an enemy, the camera can get stuck, so to speak, and I can't see quite where I want to when fighting. When facing a lot of enemies, I just ended up turning off the targeting and controlling the camera myself. There is a lot of platforming in the game. Not to say it's a bad thing, but there were just times when I thought to myself, shouldn't we be there already? But I would much rather prefer more than less in this case. Alice has a double jump and a glide like Princess Peach in the 2D Mario games. She can also triple jump and quadruple jump. Alice quickly acquires the shrink ability, where you can shrink and see the world in a different light. With this ability, she can see hints and platforms that would otherwise be invisible, along with go through keyholes, which can either be to progress through the game or find bonus content. It's a nice addition. I found myself using it when I got stuck, and that was very rare. There are these Radula rooms, where you get essentially pieces of heart from Zelda. It can either be a riddle, a fight, or some other novel gameplay mechanic that they had earlier in the game. There are also some surprise 2D platforming in the game, which with its own spice. They were fun and a nice change of pace from the meat of the game. I guess they were like the mashed potatoes to the steak or chicken, if you will. There was one part of the game I won't spoil, but was a blast to play at the Queen of Hearts castle. Now, the puzzles were okay, and kind of a surprise to be honest. Luckily, you can just skip them if you like, which was a nice touch, and I figured this out way later in the game than I should have, but luckily none were too frustrating for me. Sometimes the cat comes by to chat and gives you hints of what you need to do. It's great to have him as a consistent character in the game. I love his dialogue.
Every picture tells a story. Sometimes we don't like the ending, sometimes we don't understand it. Confront what frightens or offends you. Reckless or insulting talk should never go unchallenged.
Collectible-wise, there are memories, bottles, snouts, and teeth to collect. Snouts are used to open up new paths to find collectibles or progress the story. They are considered a collectible. Bottles, I don't really think do anything, but are something to tick off. Teeth are the game's currency, and they're only used to upgrade weapons. And memories are little pieces of dialogue for characters like Alice's doctor or a family member. I really enjoyed listening to them and getting a better sense of Alice as a whole.
My father would wish that you hold your tears, girls. He lived a long life. And as the poet says, like a clock worn out with eating time, the wheels of weary life at last stood still.
I wanted to give this its own section because of how good and creative it is. Each location in Wonderland is a feast to look at. They are zany and bizarre, and some make me a little uncomfortable, but in a good way. Each world, gameplay-wise, is very similar, but they have their own distinct feel. Alice gets a new outfit with each world, which are really cute. Each location has their own distinct characters that need Alice's help, and the environments are very linear, but only a few branching paths that lead to collectibles, which isn't a bad thing, but something I noticed. There are some places that could go with some polish, like gaps in the branches that look like Alice can walk past them or through them, but surprised there is an invisible wall there that doesn't feel right, or choosing the story path and not the collectible path and not being able to backtrack, but these were far and few between. So this is an old game. I had to put the physics on low so the game wouldn't get stuck in an infinite loading screen. Now the game consistently crashes when I start the story mode upon first opening the game, but after I reopened it, it loaded just fine. There are guides to get the game running a lot better on Steam, and I particularly like the Alice Madness Returns Essential Guide, which I'll link below. This guide talks about the history of the series too, which I thought was quite interesting. I was surprised to find that there was bonus content in the game game, like new costumes and the option to play the original first game. Now, I put an asterisk on the ability to play the first game because while you can open up the choice to play it, you have to download the game and load it into the game files. This is because the Origin release with all the bonus content and all had this. However, that version is no longer available, but a lot of it is still accessible in the game's files. So you have to go into the files and activate them. Overall, this game is definitely worth playing at least once if you like platformers. I think it's really only available on PC. Of course, you could get it for the PS3 and Xbox 360, purchase a copy online or something. I came to this game for the platforming and stayed for the crazy good art design, stories, and super satisfying combat. I can see why there is a fan base for this, and I wish the third game released, Alice Asylum. Based on the Bible they released, I do wish to play it. Oh well, I'm glad I got this game and I got to see a glimpse of what the next game would be. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to take care of yourselves, okay? I'll see you next time.
Speak your mind, say what you're thinking. Just be you. Just